down the windows. It is one of the safest vehicles on earth, if not the safest vehicles on earth, as it should be, protecting the U.S. president, Emmanuel Macron. And you can see the French First Lady, yes, Madame Macron, who are waiting for the U.S. president. Let's take this in for just a second.
Is the First Lady there?
Melania Trump is right there,
yes,
in red.
Of course. Oh no, that's very French.
Okay, so we have just witnessed, and I think a lot of people will have been waiting for this quite keenly, the handshake between Emmanuel Macron and Donald Trump. Of course, there is a history behind that handshake. There was quite a macho, alpha male handshake just a few weeks ago, which Mr. Macron was saying was very politically significant. That one looked benign enough from where we stand, and the two couples standing side by side.
Vastly different visions will stand side by side in Paris this week. Donald Trump and the French President Emmanuel Macron together on Bastille Day. It was a turning point in the French Revolution, and they will both on the Champs-Élysées to mark 100 years since the U.S. entered World War I. But the relationship has taken some rocky turns. President Trump openly supported show of force marked their first meeting at NATO. Macron later said it wasn't innocent. It was a moment of truth. That same trip, Macron took another dig at Trump when he swerved away from the U.S. president to greet the German Chancellor Angela Merkel first. And then Trump threw a pie in the French president's face when just days later he withdrew the United States from the Paris Climate Accord. So what difference will a month make? Can the America First president find common ground with the globalist French leader? As editor-in-chief of Paris Match, Olivier Royan is a long-time observer of both Trump and Macron, and he joins me now from Paris. Welcome to the program.
Good evening, Christiane.
So that was a long wind-up to say, can they find common ground? What do you make of the sort of show of force that both of them have been displaying in their last two meetings? What do you expect from this one this week?
As you said, I mean, it's the relationship started on rocky grounds. I mean, this strong handshake that they had in Brussels, and then you didn't mention the video by Macron, "Make our planet great again." I mean, this was like a challenge to Trump. I think the thing considerably get better in Hamburg last week and last weekend, with the First Lady being there, and the talk. There were something in the body language, in the small talks between the two presidents that make them closer. I think it's what's going on, what will take place in Paris tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, is that's two leaders. They believe that it's a clever political calculation on both sides. Maybe, I mean, each of them find interest in being on the same stage for Bastille Day. I'm not sure that they're going to solve the issue of the Paris Agreement. The trade issue won't be discussed very likely. But what's going to happen is that two presidents will be on the same stage. And what they will do is they will celebrate the sacrifice of 50,000 Americans in 1917. And I think both of them, they probably understood that the relationship between France and the United States goes far beyond the simple relationship between these two men. I mean, it goes back to Lafayette being engaged in supporting the American Revolution.
Indeed.
It goes back to Pershing in 1917.
Indeed, it
does.
does.
Omaha Beach.
Yep, and the values of both revolutions are very similar. And I just want to ask you whether you think, look, a lot of commentators have said that when President Trump made that big speech in Warsaw, it was actually very important because he told the Poles, he told Europe that actually Europe would not be abandoned by the United States. And Warsaw obviously has Poland has a lot of problems being a frontline state with Russia. So he did make that statement. What can he do to further reassure Europe, to reassure President Macron and the French, I don't know, about is Europe good or bad? You know, he really took a very anti-Europe tone during the French election campaign.
I think it will have to go further in the direction of his speech in Poland. I mean, this was one speech, and then what kind of action will follow. What you have seen here is since the election in April, Macron has been trying to establish himself as the new commander-in-chief. He went on a very international move. He went from Brussels to Sicilia and then to Hamburg, and yesterday he was at the ICO in Lausanne to promote the Olympic Games in Paris. So Macron has been trying. He saw the vacuum between on one side Putin and on the other side Trump. I mean, being himself as like the new kid on the block, and he has been seeing the vacuum also of this special relationship between the United Kingdom and Washington. I mean, this was not expected. I mean, Trump was supposed to go to London, and instead of going to London, he's going to Paris. So I think Macron likes to surprise. Macron likes to seduce, and he believes that in discussing with Donald Trump, he can achieve something.
Well, that's the key point. I guess what does he think he can achieve? And I just need to point out, you're absolutely right. He was meant to come, Donald Trump, to Britain this year, but apparently now it's not going to be before the end of this year. As you know, Donald Trump is not that popular around the world. Only 14% of the French have confidence in him to do the right thing, and he has been very anti-France. I mean, Bastille Day will mark 1 year since that terrible terrorism in Nice, the vehicle attack, and obviously the assassination of the priest as well. And after that, this is what Trump said as candidate.
France is no longer France. France is no longer France. They won't like me for saying that, but you see what happened in Nice, you see what happened yesterday with the priest who was supposed to be a spectacular man. France is no longer France.
So how's he going to get around that with the French people and the French journalists when they question him in the presser?
Oh, I think on the one side you have France has been living on the Obama mania over the last 8 years. So Obama was very popular in this country. On the other side, Trump has not been very popular. I mean, he's being portrayed in the magazine, in the newspaper, on television as a caricature of himself. I mean, there are a lot of jokes going on around Trump, and a lot of real distrust towards him. But on the other hand, there was a poll today that was released saying that 59% of the French people believe that Macron was right when to invite Trump in Paris for Bastille Day. Christian, you have to go back to the relationship between Reagan and Mitterrand, for example. When Reagan was visiting Mitterrand in 1982, he was in the car with the US ambassador, and he was saying, what is this story of having communist minister in this French government? I mean, this was something unbelievable for Ronald Reagan. So this has been before. I mean, I think these two men must feel some kind of fascination toward themselves. I mean,
well,
on one hand, I remember interviewing Donald Trump a long time ago, like 30 years ago, when he was an entrepreneur and a successful businessman in New York. And I asked him a question. I find this in my files, and I asked him in question. It must have been like 1989. And I said, Donald, do you think you could be a president one day? And he said, yes, I think I could do it. So he must be fascinated with these 39-year-old young politicians that managed to be the outsider who became president. And on the other side, I'm sure that Macron is fascinated with the personality of Trump, because he's absolutely is very difficult to surrender.
Very, very interesting. Well, two very different characters. We'll see how the chemistry works and whether